In today's lesson, I'm going to show you how to use a service called DeployHQ. So first, what is this service? Well, these days, if possible, you should really be trying to use a platform as a service, something like Heroku, or if you're a PHP developer, there's lots of choices such as PHP Fog, Pagoda Box, Orchestra, but still, sometimes you have those older projects that might still be FTP based. Maybe it's just a simple static website that you use, or maybe it's a plugin or demo or example site and you're still using FTP. Well, we can still harness the advantages of Git-based deployment, but still have it ultimately FTP your files up, or SSH if you need to. And DeployHQ is a service that allows us to do that. So in this lesson, I'll show you how you can do it. The first thing we need to do is actually have a project to work with. And the only thing that this will require is that you are using something like GitHub or one of its peers. I'm going to be using GitHub, so let's go ahead and create a new repo. So we'll create our repo, and I'm just going to call it temporary. And I will initialize it with a README file so that I can clone it. All right, that's all set up. I will copy the SSH URL and go into the terminal. Now we will clone it. Git clone, I'll paste that in, and we'll call the folder temp. Great, now I will cd into it, and of course we just have an empty directory with a README file. So the first thing that I'm going to do is touch an index.html file. You can open this up in your favorite code editor, it doesn't really matter. We're going to say first edit. I'll save that and exit out, and now we will add index.html to the staging area. We will commit it, and we'll just say add index file. And now I'm going to push those changes up to GitHub. All right, so now if I come back and I reload the page, we have added that file. So now what I want to accomplish is whenever I push changes to GitHub, it's automatically going to be FTP'd up to my server. So let's see how we can do that. The first step is to sign up for DeployHQ.com. It'll only take you a couple seconds, and you can test out the free service. Once you log in, this is what you'll see, and we're going to create our first project. We called ours temporary, and we will create an empty project. So now it wants to know what our code base details are. Well, you can use Codebase or GitHub or Bitbucket. I prefer GitHub, so I will give it my credentials. And what that's going to do is pull in a list of all of the repos that I have. So I will just quickly look for the temporary, there it is, and I will use that repo with this project. Great, so now that's been added, the next step is to simply give it the FTP details. So we'll call it temporary. The protocol, I would recommend that you use SSH, but in this lesson we're going to use FTP only because I think a larger percentage of you will be using FTP, but definitely look into SSH. All right, so we're going to leave the port to the default. The environment, if you have a specific one like production or testing, you can add that here. We're going to deploy the master branch. A subdirectory, this would be maybe you're using something like Yeoman, and when you do Yeoman build, it will take your production files and store them within a dist directory, and that might be on GitHub. So you might want to specify something like that. In our case, though, we don't need to. Next, path on server. This is where we're going to upload the files. So to give you an example, if I switch over to transmit, here's some of the various URLs that I have. We're going to put it within demo.jeffrey-way.com. And I will create, there's lots of stupid demos here, but I will create a new one called temporary, and that's where we want everything to be stored. So this is the directory path that I want to upload to. So I will just add that here. Path on server, domains, demo.jeffrey-way.com/html, and within the temporary directory. All right, finally, I just need the username and password, and if you don't know those, just go to your host and search for them, and they should come up. In this case, I will paste mine in. Now, one thing to note, if you run this and it doesn't work, make sure you might need to use FTP passive mode or active mode and just check your host to see which one you need. In this case, I need to use passive, and I'm working with Media Temple in this case. So here we get a quick error. It looks like I left the host name blank, so I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. In your case, it would be something like ftp.example.com. I will go ahead and paste mine in. All right, once again, paste in the password and try to create it. Excellent, so now that's been added. So if I click on the edit button right here, what I want you to see is that we can set up auto deployment. And we can do that by using a post receive hook. So I'll show you how to do that with GitHub. I'm just going to copy this URL right here, We already have auto deploy set to on, so I just need to set up that ping. So back into my GitHub profile, I'm going to the admin section for this repo, service hooks, webhooks URL, and we're going to paste it in right there. So what this means is that whenever you push to your GitHub repo, after it's done, GitHub is going to ping this URL. And when that happens, that will instruct DeployHQ to take those new files and FTP them up to the folder that you designated. So I will update settings, and now we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and edit a file again and see if it works. Vim index.html. I will change this to second. And now let's add index to the staging area, and we'll say change heading. And I'm going to push that up to GitHub. Let's first make sure that it did push. So I will go to index.html, second edit. Great. And now you might need to give it 30 seconds to a minute, but check the URL. In this case, we're into my temporary directory. Don't worry too much about this. That's just because the domain is no longer hosted with Media Temple. So I'm actually going directly through my grid server. But in your case, it would be example.com/temporary/ the name of the file. Anyways, now we can see second edit. So that's really cool. We edit the file, some info here. We will save it and exit out. We will add it to the staging area. We'll commit it, some revision. We're going to push it up to GitHub so that updates it on GitHub, and that will also update the file on your server. After around 20 seconds or so, we refresh the page, and now that has been added. So yeah, DeployHQ is an excellent service. There's obviously a couple downsides to a system like this. One, probably shouldn't be using FTP in most of your projects. But again, sometimes for those smaller, more legacy projects, you're still using it, so you might as well at least adopt a Git-based deployment. And there's also things like, as it's updating the files, it's possible that somebody visiting your site might see an error, and that's because we are FTPing and replacing the files. But nonetheless, if you have to use FTP for older projects and such, DeployHQ is an excellent service. And that does it for this lesson. My name's Jeffrey Wei, and I'll see you next time.